ultimate travel itinerary always seems to be missing one thing: grocery stores. They're not on TripAdvisor or what people post on Instagram because nobody flies across the world to take a selfie on aisle 7. But they're where you actually see daily life. They're unavoidable errands where a city tells you who lives there, what they cook, what they value. In California, my grocery store routine looks something like this. I start at Costco for my basics: milk, eggs, butter. And then I drive to my local Asian market for seaweed snacks and curry packets. And then I remember that my friends are coming over for dinner tomorrow, so I get back in the car and drive again, this time to the Middle Eastern grocery store for halal meat. By the time I get home, the sun has set, and I've spent my entire day chasing pieces of home across different stores. It takes all day because buying cultural products isn't as simple as buying butter. That difference is a map of social distance, a reminder that your comfort is specialty, not standard. In almost every country, one grocery store is treated as normal, while the others are treated as cultural add-ons, two parallel aisles that never touch. But in Abu Dhabi, it's all one. Lulu Hypermarket is our main grocery store, the one-stop shop for all your goods. Forget driving 20 minutes from store to store. At Lulu, you just turn down a different aisle. Spices from every corner of the world under the same roof. Walking through those aisles feels like moving through a version of the world where difference doesn't create distance. That design makes coexistence ordinary, not exceptional. That feeling was familiar. My family is Catholic, but growing up, I had a prayer mat in my bedroom, and I always knew which way faced Mecca for any of my friends who needed to pray when they came over. In Abu Dhabi, coexistence isn't abstract, it's daily life. Every home, every classroom, every friendship was shared across differences. Lulu wasn't just a store. It was a reflection of the world I grew up in. When I shop elsewhere, that feeling disappears. At the Asian market, I'm the daughter searching for dumpling wrappers. At the Middle Eastern market, I'm the friend picking up kanafa for dessert. At the American supermarket, I'm a foreigner, decoding snacks that everyone else seems to just recognize. Each stop feels like I'm unpacking one identity and leaving the others in the car, still buckled in. But at Lulu, I never had to choose which version of myself to bring inside. Most of my family lives in Indonesia, as they have for generations now, but even there, belonging has always been conditional. During Suharto's rule, anti-Chinese laws banned families like mine from speaking Chinese or celebrating Lunar New Year, so I was always taught to keep that part of my identity quiet. Yet, I never felt completely Indonesian either. There, I'm called dari luar, which means from outside. I spent my childhood across 3 continents. First in Sugar Land, Texas, where I enjoyed the warm sun. And then in Scotland, in a suburb near Aberdeen, where there were more sheep than people and where skies were perpetually grey. There, I went to a public Scottish preschool where I was one of few kids who didn't have ginger or blonde hair. But most of my childhood was spent in Abu Dhabi. And living there, I very quickly learned how brutally hot and humid the desert sun could be, but also about the powers of perpetual air conditioning. And when I moved alone to California in 9th grade, I left pieces of myself behind with the city that raised me and my parents who still live there. I went to an American school in Abu Dhabi, so I thought I already knew what it meant to be American. It wasn't until I arrived I realized how foreign I still felt. I wasn't familiar with the childhood games or shows my friends were into, and I've never been able to sit amongst Indonesians, Americans, Chinese, Emiratis, and feel like I'm fully one of them, even though I call each place home, because each place claimed part of me, but never the whole. But at Lulu, walking past snacks from all over the world, dates beside Indomie and Frosted Flakes, it felt like moving through a world where everything existed side by side. Those aisles weren't just food, they were proof of possibility. Lulu taught me that coexistence isn't about erasing difference. It's about holding contradictions together. It's about living in a world that none of us built alone, but all of us inhabit. A borrowed world. Shared, layered, and unfinished, where my identities don't have to take turns. Our world is built from shared spaces and shared words, from paths crossed long before we arrived, and traces left behind by people we may never meet. Everything we use, food, music, language, even the ways we organize our lives, carries the imprint of others. Nothing meaningful is made in isolation. isolation. What lasts is what has been passed, adapted, and held in common. Language might be the clearest record of that process. Indonesian is a borrowed language. I was 5 the first time I noticed. In Arabic class, my teacher wrote kursi on the board. And I stared at the word momentarily before realizing that kursi meant chair in Indonesian too. It kept happening. In Mexico, I saw gratis painted on a storefront. Gratis, free, in Spanish and in Indonesian. Years later, when I was in the Netherlands, I heard a Dutch couple say kulkas, refrigerator, or kulkas in Indonesian. If you listen closely to a language, you can hear who passed through it. And that's why when people ask me, where are you from? I'd always pause. Indonesia, Abu Dhabi, Indonesian Chinese, California, should I pick a single place or tell my life story? In classrooms, introductions, and even passport forms, I hesitated, afraid I'd choose the wrong answer. And for a long time, this pause embarrassed me. It made me think something was missing. But language taught me otherwise. Gratis, kursi, and kulkas are all words taken, adapted, and made our own. It's a language stitched together by encounters at ease with hybridity. So I started listening differently. When a classmate in Spanish explained love, cariño, I thought of casi. Different sounds, but same meanings. Instead of tracing differences, I traced echoes, shared rhythms that stayed even as the words changed. I noticed these patterns everywhere. Batik patterns echo Indian block prints. Gamelan melodies intertwine with Javanese and Arabic scales. Languages survive because they remember where they've been. But what struck me wasn't just that mixture creates beauty, it was how selectively we celebrate it. We ask people to be complex, but we build systems that only recognize one story at a time. We admire hybridity in art, in food, in music, in language. Yet in daily life, we organize the world around a single standard. We treat complexity as a threat, so we simplify. We divide the world into clean categories, us and them, native and foreign, normal and other. Not because these divisions are accurate, but because they're easier to manage. And that instinct, to reduce, to flatten, it doesn't stop at identity. It scales. It shapes how we draw borders, how we decide whose histories count and whose suffering can be ignored. Long before there is violence, there is simplification. And long before there is conflict, there is the refusal to hold complexity. I once thought that the discomfort I felt, being asked to choose, explain, prove who I am, was personal. But it isn't. It's a small version of a much larger habit, of a world trained to prefer certainty over understanding and sameness over coexistence. And if we are truly serious about coexistence, then the work begins far earlier than diplomacy and much later than theory. It begins in whether we are willing to sit with complexity before we turn it into difference, that difference into distance, and that distance into division. I've often felt caught between identities, never able to fully be myself without letting go of at least a part of myself. I became fluent in adaptation, when to translate where I come from into something simpler, and when to nod along to references I didn't grow up with. But that kind of fluency comes at a cost, because every time we leave something behind, even momentarily, we begin to wonder if that part ever really belonged to us at all. And now I see my fragmented identity not as pieces to fix, but as ingredients to mix. The habits that shape coexistence aren't rehearsed in policy rooms. They're rehearsed in places as simple as grocery stores, where we decide what feels normal and worth accommodating. We all live with our own aisles of difference, but when we reach across them, we find that what fills our carts isn't so different after all. Thank you.